In 1977, police arrested a 22-year-old man for a series of violent crimes. 3 women accused Billy Milligan of kidnapping, robbery, and sexual assault. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The victims identified him. Witnesses recognized him. To investigators, the case looked simple. Billy Milligan was guilty. At least, that's what everyone believed. But when detectives brought Billy into the interrogation room, something didn't make sense. Instead of anger, Billy seemed confused. Instead of denying the evidence, he appeared genuinely terrified. Again and again, he insisted he had never met the women. Again and again, he claimed he couldn't remember the crimes. The detectives weren't convinced. Criminals lied all the time. Memory loss was one of the oldest tricks in the book. Then something happened that nobody in the room could explain. Billy stopped crying. His posture changed. His expression changed. Even his voice changed. Moments earlier, he had sounded frightened. Now, he sounded calm, educated, confident. When investigators asked who they were speaking to, the answer left the room in silence. "My name is Arthur." Arthur? There was no Arthur connected to the investigation, no Arthur among the victims, no Arthur involved in the case. Yet the man sitting in front of them insisted he wasn't Billy, and Arthur was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, more identities began to appear. Different names, different voices, different personalities. One spoke with a British accent. Another was a frightened child. Another claimed responsibility for actions Billy couldn't remember. Psychiatrists were called in, then more psychiatrists, then more, because nobody could agree on what they were witnessing. Was Billy Milligan one of the greatest con artists in American history? Or had doctors uncovered something far more disturbing? A mind divided against itself. To understand what doctors believed was happening inside Billy's mind, we first need to understand something strange about the human brain. Your brain has one goal above all else: survival. Not happiness, not success, not even truth. Survival. And sometimes, survival comes at a terrible cost. When children experience overwhelming trauma, the brain searches for ways to escape pain. Most people think of trauma as a wound. Psychologists often describe it differently, as a fracture. Not a fracture of bone, a fracture of identity. Imagine being exposed to experiences so painful that your developing mind cannot fully process them. The memories become unbearable. The emotions become unbearable. Reality itself becomes unbearable. So the brain creates distance, a psychological escape route. For most people, that distance remains invisible. But in rare and controversial cases, the separation becomes so extreme that different parts of a person's identity begin functioning independently. This condition is known as Dissociative Identity Disorder, or DID. Contrary to what movies often suggest, DID is not the brain creating multiple people for dramatic effect. According to many experts, it is the brain desperately trying to protect one person from experiences too painful to endure. The tragedy is that the very mechanism designed to protect someone can eventually make life even more confusing. After months of examinations, many psychiatrists concluded that Billy Milligan was suffering from DID. The diagnosis changed everything. Billy was no longer viewed simply as a criminal. He became one of the most controversial psychological cases in modern history. Some experts believed his condition was genuine. Others believed he was manipulating everyone around him. The debate continues to this day. But one thing is certain. Billy Milligan forced the world to confront a frightening possibility. What if the human mind could hide parts of itself. In the end, Billy became the first person in American history to be acquitted of major crimes because of a diagnosis linked to multiple personalities. He spent years in psychiatric institutions instead of prison. He died in 2014. And even today, nobody completely agrees on where the truth ends and the mystery begins. But Billy's story didn't disappear. Decades later, Hollywood took a similar fear and transformed it into one of the most influential psychological films ever made, Fight Club. At first glance, the connection seems obvious. A man discovers another identity living inside his mind, an identity that slowly takes control. Reality begins to collapse. But that isn't why Fight Club became a cultural phenomenon. If the film were simply about dissociative identity disorder, most people would have forgotten it long ago. Instead, people remembered Tyler Durden. Not because they believed he was real, because they understood what he represented. Tyler was everything the narrator felt he wasn't. Confident, fearless, charismatic, free. He said the things the narrator was afraid to say. He did the things the narrator was afraid to do. He became the version of himself he secretly wished existed. And that idea points to something much deeper than any diagnosis. More than a century ago, psychologist Carl Jung proposed a theory that still fascinates people today. He believed every person carries a hidden side, a psychological shadow. The shadow contains the parts of ourselves we reject, the anger we hide, the jealousy we deny, the desires we suppress, the thoughts we never dare to speak aloud. Most people spend their lives pretending this side doesn't exist. But according to Jung, ignoring the shadow doesn't destroy it. It only drives it deeper into the darkness. And what remains hidden often becomes more powerful. That is what Fight Club understood so well. Tyler Durden wasn't terrifying because he was another personality. Tyler was terrifying because he represented everything the narrator had buried inside himself. The rage, the frustration, the need for freedom, the desire to break every rule he had spent his life obeying. The longer he ignored those feelings, the stronger Tyler became. Until eventually, Tyler wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. He was in control. And maybe that's why stories like these continue to haunt us. Not because most people suffer from dissociative identity disorder. They don't. Not because most people have another personality living inside their minds. They don't. But because almost everyone has parts of themselves they refuse to face. Parts they lock away. Parts they deny. Parts they hope nobody will ever see. Billy Milligan made the world wonder whether the mind could create another identity. Fight Club asked a far more uncomfortable question. What if the person you've been hiding from your entire life isn't another identity at all? What if it's you? What if every fear you've ignored, every impulse you've buried, every truth you've refused to confront has been growing stronger in the dark, waiting, watching, becoming something you no longer recognize? Because the most frightening possibility isn't that another person is living inside your mind. It's that the person taking control has been you all along.